Okay, so what I wanted to do on this video is go back, way back, and I would like to talk about the grouping of the houses in our astrology chart. And in particular, what I want to talk about is the hemispheres and the quadrants in our charts. Now, there's something that I've noticed in the last few years with astrology, and many astrologers that have studied astrology wouldn't have noticed it as well, and that is a lot of the important bits are being overlooked, and only the astrological information that's easy to retain is being retained. But I really believe that we need to go way further back into what a chart means. So I am going to talk about hemispheres and quadrants, and how integrating our planets into those houses will help you understand yourself better, reading transits and even just looking at charts. No doubt if you're watching me, you've looked at a chart before. If you don't know how to read one, you may know the level that many do, and that's getting one from astro.com, which is great. I love seeing those charts everywhere, but not everybody knows what it means. To them it just looks like a bunch of symbols in a circle. So how do you start to delineate that chart without, I mean, obviously you need to learn symbols and glyphs. That's the most important thing. So learning those symbols, it's very easy to do. I've got lots of PDFs and information down below and through links that you can use for that, and there's heaps on the internet as well. But what there's not a lot of is really deep integrating planets into houses discussions, and that's what I'm going to do tonight. Okay, so there's 12 houses on the astrology chart. So the whole chart has the numbers 1 through to 12. That's 12 segments. Excuse me, coffee making me burp. 12 segments of 30 degrees, which makes a 360-degree circle, which is all around us. So that's 12 30-degree segments. So the houses, they're not just individual entities, they work together as well. So I'm talking about if you have planets in these houses or no planets in these houses, there's different areas that you need to look at, which we'll get into when I talk about this more. But basically we have hemispheres, which is east, west, south and north. And east is where west is where east is, and south and north are opposite as well. It's flipped, and there's a whole reason behind that which I won't get into today, but anyway. So we have hemispheres, but we're actually going to focus more on the quadrants, so we'll go to that. But so from houses from 1 through to 6, so the bottom of the chart, they're called the personal houses. And then the houses from the 7th house over to the 12th house are collective houses. So we have personal houses down the bottom and collective houses up the top. So that's just 2 different quadrants initially to look at. So if you have a whole bunch of planets down the bottom, that's more of a personal, inward, reflective type of person. If you have more planets on the top half, that's somebody that has a bit more confidence and likes to get out there a little bit more, and it's the very polar opposite of the bottom. So the houses in the northern hemisphere, 1 to 6, are directly concerned with the development of an individual and his or her separate identity. That's the personal houses. That's the good definition. The houses in the southern hemisphere, which is houses 7 through to 12, focus on the interconnection of the individual with others, on an intimate one-on-one level, or with society as a whole. So that's those two different levels. So houses 1 to 3, so 1, 2 and 3 is quadrant 1, and that quadrant is responsible, or the meaning of that quadrant is self-development. Quadrant 2 is houses 4, 5 and 6, and the meaning of that quadrant is self-expression. Quadrant 3 is houses 7, 8 and 9, and that is self-expansion. And then houses 10, 11 and 12 is quadrant 4, and that is self-transcendence. So the whole chart is split into 4 quadrants. So do you have a lot of planets in the first house to the third house? If you do, this lifetime is about self-development. If you have a lot of planets in between the 4th house and the 6th house, or the DC basically, on that, in between that angle there, it's about self-expression, and that's what is expected of you in this life. If you were born with a lot of planets in quadrant 3, which is in the houses 7 through to 10, but only to 9, then your life is about expansion and understanding deeper, going on another level. If more of your planets are in quadrant 4, so houses 10, 11 or 12, that's a whole level of self-transcendence. That's it's great. It's good to have planets in 10, 11 and 12. It can be hard, but it's good. Of course, it's good to have planets everywhere, and you're going to see in your chart that you have planets scattered all over the place. Some people won't even be able to narrow down the quadrants because they're so scattered. But you just have to look at each quadrant and what it represents, what planets are in there, and how does that fit into your life. The birds are really loud tonight. So quadrant 1, houses 1 to 3, again, the individual begins to take shape as a distinct entity. So you're born. Well, I'll summarise that in the end. You have a separate identity which forms through the differentiation of self. So the first house is being born, and the body. The second house is substance, and then the third house is the mind. So it's how our identity is formed, that houses 1 to 3. Houses 4 to 6, quadrant 2, growth involves the furthest expression and refinement of the differentiating self. So the 4th house is shaped by the family background and the ancestral inheritance genealogy, the IC. And we mould a more sort of a sense of our own identity and express to seek who we are outwardly. So from the 4th house to the 5th house, that's where self-expression comes into it. And then we fine-tune that self-expression into the certain skills and capabilities that we have, which is the 6th house, which is Virgo's natural house. So that's how that works. That's that lower hemisphere, and quadrants 1 through to 6. So as you can see, it includes each house, but it's building a picture along the way. So the houses 7 through to 9, or quadrant 3, is expanding awareness through relationships with other people, and that's that 7th house. The 8th house depicts the breaking down of our own ego and our own identity through that process of merging with another person from the 7th house of relationships or having a partner, and subsequently from the 8th house it broadens and awakens something inside of us, and we're then shown the 9th house, which is this higher level of thinking. Then when we get into the last quadrant, quadrant 4, so the 10th, 11th and 12th houses, the main concern there is expanding or transcending the boundaries of your own self, but to include not just one other person, but many other people, to include everybody. So the 10th house describes your role in society, and how society sees you, your job, your public persona if you have one. And then the 11th house is representing the group that we associate ourselves with, or the group consciousness that we surround ourselves and start to explore. And then the spiritual identity in relation between the greater transcended universe and being able then to include ourselves is the final house. So it's a culmination of the first house through... I'll let the birds talk. It's a culmination from the quadrant 1, house 1, from being born, to becoming a substance, a person, to having a mind of their own, to being shaped by the family and the genealogy and the ancestry, to understanding then who we are, our self-expression, the 5th house. Hopefully you're keeping up with me. And then we fine-tune our skills and figure out what we're really good at with the 6th house. The 7th house, we start to expand our awareness with other people around us. Who is the other person that we're having a relationship with? Why do we have relationships? All those sorts of things. It's a close encounter between your own reality and somebody else's reality. So then the 8th house, the one next to the 7th house, is the breaking down of our own ego, because we understand that merging with another person is important. You can't do it alone. Then to the 9th house, which is the subsequent inevitable awakening of the mind, which leads to higher thinking. I always think of university when I think of the 9th house. It does rule universities, but it's like the university of after being born. So I imagine you're born, and then you go to primary school or kindergarten in the 3rd house, and then by the 5th house you're in high school, starting to rebel. By the 7th house you're probably deciding what to do next and having a relationship and whatnot. By the 9th house you're going to uni and studying and realising the world's a way bigger place. Then by the time the 10th house comes along, you know what you want to do, and it's your career and your life and how the public sees you and sees what you've done for that last 10 houses. Is that a weird way to describe time? Then going to the 11th house, as I said, which is quadrant 4, understanding your role in society as in comparison to the group consciousness, which is also Uranian as well, 11th house, Uranus. Going into then exploring your own spiritual identity and subconscious, and understanding the inclusion of the self with the greater is the last house. So it's a beautiful full circle of quadrants. It feels like maybe it would be hard to remember, but it's not. When you think of it like that, you start to read charts differently. You'll see when you've got planets grouped in houses that, oh, hang on a minute, this person's actually, you know, okay, a lot of planets in the 5th house. This person, in this lifetime, it's time for them to express who they truly are. They've gone through the whole birth, everything, understanding, learning through the mind and the genealogy in your past, and then it moves on to self-expression, and it's really showing who you are. If you have a whole bunch of planets in the 11th house, or the 10th house going into the 11th house even, excuse me, you're understanding that what you're doing for the world is not just for you, it's for the world. So you can really get a good idea of what a chart is, what's your sole purpose, I believe, by just knowing the quadrants. So I hope that was helpful, and you'll see all the pictures throughout, and yeah, I'll be back with another lesson soon.